The alarm on my console screamed before I even saw her ship. I was 3 hours into a night shift at Kestrel Point, a small trading outpost stuck on the edge of nowhere, when the proximity sensors lit up red. A ship had dropped out of warp too close to the station, moving too fast, tumbling like it had lost control. I grabbed the comm and called for a lockdown, my hands shaking as I pulled up the visual feed. The ship was small, sleek, unfamiliar, not a cargo hauler, not a pirate raider either, based on the shape. It clipped the edge of our docking ring, sparks flying, before finally grinding to a stop inside Bay 4. Alarms kept blaring. I grabbed my jacket and ran. By the time I reached the bay, station security had already surrounded the ship with weapons half raised, unsure what to expect. The hatch hissed open, smoke curled out, and then she stepped through. She was small, thin, with skin the color of pale blue moonlight, and large black eyes that darted around the room like she expected to be attacked any second. Her clothes were torn at the shoulder. She looked terrified. I stepped forward before security could do anything reckless. "Stand down," I said, raising a hand. "She's alone. Look at her. She's not a threat." The girl's eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she said something in a language I didn't understand, her voice cracking with fear. My translator earpiece buzzed and clicked, struggling to catch up. "Help, please." That was enough. I motioned for security to lower their weapons and stepped closer, slow and steady, the way you'd approach a frightened animal. "You're safe here," I said. "What happened to your ship?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway behind me, then to the security officers, then back to me. It was like she was deciding whether she could trust any of us. Finally, her translator caught up enough for me to understand her properly. "They are still coming," she said. "You have to help me, please." My stomach dropped. Coming. As in someone was chasing her. I turned to the security captain, a broad man named Elliot Marsh, who had been running this station longer than I'd been alive. "Lock the outer bay doors. Scan the sector for incoming ships, now." Elliot didn't argue. He barked orders into his comm and the room came alive with movement. I turned back to the girl. "What's your name?" "Vay," she said. "Vay Solen." "Okay, Vay. I'm Colin. Colin Ashford. I work here. Tell me what's happening. Who's chasing you?" She wrapped her arms around herself, and for the first time, I noticed the shape of fear settling into her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the exits, like she was counting escape routes. Her species, whatever it was, clearly weren't built for confrontation. Every instinct in her body looked like it was screaming to run. "Bounty hunters," she said, "from the Threll Combine. I stole something from them. Data. It could destroy them if it reaches the right people." My pulse spiked. The Threll Combine was not a name you wanted attached to your problems. They were a criminal network that operated across 3 sectors, running weapons, slaves, and worse. If they were hunting her, then whatever she'd stolen had to be serious. "What kind of data?" I asked. "Proof," she said. "Proof of what they did to my home world. Proof that could get them shut down for good. I was supposed to deliver it to a contact 3 jumps from here, but my ship was damaged in the escape. I didn't think I'd make it this far." Elliot's voice crackled over the comm. "Colin, we've got 3 ships incoming. Unmarked, moving fast. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes. My mind raced. Kestrel Point wasn't a military station. We had a handful of guards, outdated defense turrets, and a docking ring built for trade, not war. If the Threll Combine sent real firepower, we wouldn't survive a fight. "We need to move," I said, grabbing Vay's arm gently. "Is the data on your ship?" She nodded, reaching into a pouch at her side and pulling out a small silver drive. "I already copied it here, but my ship's systems are fried. I can't transmit it anywhere." "Then we transmit it from the station," I said, already moving toward the control room. "Elliot, get everyone to defensive positions. Vay, come with me." We ran through the corridors, her small steps struggling to keep up with my longer strides. She kept glancing over her shoulder every few seconds, flinching at every shadow, every sound. I slowed down just enough to keep pace with her without losing time. "You don't have to be scared," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We're going to get this done."
"You don't understand,"
she said, her voice shaking.
"If they catch me, they won't just kill me. They'll use what happened to my people as an example.
They'll make sure no one else ever tries to expose them again." That single sentence lit something angry inside me. I'd grown up hearing stories about how outposts like Kestrel Point existed, because bigger governments didn't care enough to protect the edges of space. People like Vay fell through the cracks all the time. Not today. We reached the control room, and I dropped into the main console chair, pulling up the long-range transmission array. "This will take a few minutes to lock onto a relay," I said. The moment it's sent, it's out of their hands. They can't erase it. Vey stood beside me, her hands trembling as she watched the numbers cycle on screen. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." I didn't look away from the console. "Because you needed help, and I could give it. That's usually enough of a reason where I come from." She went quiet after that, but I caught her staring at me for a moment longer than necessary before she looked away, her cheeks darkening into a deeper shade of blue. I didn't think much of it at the time. There wasn't time to think about anything except the countdown ticking on the screen, and the 3 ships closing in on our position. 2 minutes until the ships arrive, Elliot's voice barked over the comm. "Turrets are online, but Colin, I need to be honest with you. If those are combat vessels, our defenses aren't going to hold for long." "Just buy me time," I said. "The transmission is almost locked." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the hum of machines and the occasional beep of the console. Vey stood close to me, her eyes fixed on the transmission bar as it crawled toward completion. 60%, 70, 80. Then the whole station shook. "They're firing on the outer hull," Elliot shouted. "Turrets returning fire, but we're taking damage." Vey grabbed the edge of the console, her knuckles white. "They found us already." "They probably tracked your ship's last known trajectory," I said, forcing myself to stay calm, even as alarms blared around us. 90%, almost there. Another impact rocked the station, this time closer, sending a shower of sparks from a nearby panel. Smoke started filling the room. My eyes stung, but I refused to leave the console. "Colin, get out of there!" Elliot's voice cracked with urgency. "The hull integrity on that section is failing." "Not yet," I said through gritted teeth. 95%. Vey looked at me, her expression a mixture of fear and something else I couldn't quite place. "If this doesn't work," she said, "I want you to know that you didn't have to do any of this. You could have turned me away. Most people would have." "Most people are wrong," I said simply. The transmission bar hit 100%, and a confirmation chime rang out through the room. "Transmission complete," the system announced. "Data package delivered to designated recipient." Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. The station shook violently again, this time throwing both of us to the floor. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a dim red glow. "Colin," Elliot's voice was frantic now. "One of the enemy ships is trying to force dock with Bay 4. They're sending boarding parties." I scrambled to my feet, pulling Vey up with me. "We need to move, now." We ran back through the corridors, the station groaning around us from the damage. Sparks rained down from broken conduits, and the emergency lighting made everything look like it was drenched in blood. Vey stayed close behind me, her breathing ragged with fear. But she kept moving, kept pushing forward despite everything. We reached a junction where 2 security officers were holding a defensive line, their weapons aimed down the corridor toward the docking bay. "They're through the airlock," one of them shouted. "We can't hold this position much longer." I pulled Vey behind a support pillar and peered around the corner. 3 figures in heavy armor were making their way down the hallway, weapons raised, moving with the calculated precision of professional soldiers. This wasn't a rescue mission, this was an extermination squad. "There's an escape pod bay 2 levels down," I said quietly to Vey. "If we can reach it, we can get you off the station before they secure the area." "What about you?" she asked. "I'll figure that out after you're safe," I said. Though the truth was, I had no idea what would happen to me once she was gone. The Threll Combine wouldn't just let this go. Someone at this station had helped expose them, and they'd want answers, or revenge. We moved through a maintenance corridor, avoiding the main hallways where the boarding party was advancing. The station's emergency systems groaned around us, metal creaking under the strain of battle damage. Every few seconds, another explosion rocked somewhere in the distance, followed by the shouts of security personnel trying to hold their ground. "This way," I said, pulling Vey through a narrow service hatch that led toward the lower decks. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline burning through my veins, but I kept moving, kept focused on getting her to safety. We reached the escape pod bay just as another explosion rocked the station, throwing us both against the wall. I caught Vey before she hit the ground, my arms wrapping around her small frame instinctively. For a moment, neither of us moved, our breathing ragged, the chaos of the battle fading into background noise. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarms. "For everything." I helped her steady herself, then moved toward the pod controls, punching in the emergency launch sequence. The pod door hissed open, revealing a small, cramped compartment barely large enough for one person. "Get in," I said. "The coordinates are already set for the nearest Allied outpost. They'll take care of you there." Vey hesitated at the entrance, turning back to look at me. Her cheeks darkened again. That same shade of deep blue I'd noticed earlier in the control room. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, seemingly unsure of what to say. "What is it?" I asked, glancing nervously down the corridor where the sound of boots and gunfire grew louder. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice quiet but steady, despite the chaos around us. "Something about my species that you should know before I go." "Can it wait?" I asked, only half joking as another explosion rattled the walls. "No," she said, "because if I don't say it now, I might not get another chance." I turned to face her fully, ignoring the urgency screaming in my chest to get her into that pod and away from danger. Something in her expression told me this mattered, whatever it was. "My species," she began, her words coming out in a rush now. "We don't experience fear the way most species do. When we are afraid, truly afraid, for our lives, something happens inside us, a response buried deep in our biology. It only happens once in a lifetime, when death feels closest." "Okay," I said slowly, not quite understanding where this was going. "It's called a bonding response," she continued. "When my people face true danger, our bodies release something that connects us to whoever helped save us. It isn't something we can control. It isn't something we can stop. And it happened the moment you stepped between me and your security officers back in that docking bay." My mind raced, trying to process what she was telling me. "Are you saying that back there, when I asked you to stand down and helped you? I bonded to you," she said, her cheeks now fully flushed with that deep blue color. "It's permanent. It happens only once, and only under extreme circumstances. My people call it the deepest form of gratitude our biology can create. It means wherever you go, whatever happens, a part of me will always be tied to you." I stood there stunned, the sounds of battle fading into background noise as her words sank in. This wasn't what I expected when she'd stumbled through that airlock hours ago, terrified and bleeding. I'd thought I was just helping a stranger survive a dangerous situation. I hadn't realized I was becoming part of something much bigger, something woven into the biology of an entire species I barely understood. "I didn't know that could happen," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. "Neither did I," she admitted, "not until it did. I've read about it in old stories from my people, but I never thought I would experience it myself. It only happens when the fear is real, when the danger is true, and when someone chooses to stand between you and that danger without hesitation." The corridor behind us echoed with the sound of another explosion, closer this time. We didn't have much time left before the boarding party found us. "You need to go," I said, my voice steadier now even though my mind was still spinning from everything she'd told me. "We can talk about this later, once you're safe." She nodded, stepping into the escape pod, but she paused at the threshold, turning back to look at me one final time. "Colin," she said, "thank you for not hesitating. Whatever happens next, I won't forget this." "Neither will I said, and I meant it." The pod door slid shut, and I slammed my palm against the emergency launch button. The compartment hissed, then shot away from the station with a burst of thrusters, disappearing into the darkness of space, toward the nearest Allied outpost. I turned back toward the sound of gunfire, my heart pounding but my resolve hardening. Whatever came next, at least Vey was safe. The data was already transmitted, already out of the Combine's reach. Whatever they did to me now wouldn't undo what had already been accomplished. I ran back toward the security line, finding Elliot and his officers still holding their position against the boarding party, though barely. "The escape pod launched," I shouted over the noise. "She's clear." "Good," Elliot grunted, firing another shot down the corridor. "Because these guys aren't giving up easy." The battle raged on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Station defenses eventually managed to disable one of the enemy ships enough to force the boarding party into retreat, their mission compromised the moment they realized the data had already been transmitted. Without their prize, there was no reason for them to keep risking casualties on a station that had already served its purpose against them. By the time the remaining enemy ships retreated into warp, the station was a mess of scorched walls, broken equipment, and exhausted personnel. But we had survived. Vey was safe. And whatever the Threll Combine had been hiding was now in the hands of people who could actually do something about it. 3 weeks later, a message arrived at my personal terminal. It was Vey, her face appearing on screen from what looked like a proper medical facility, no longer covered in soot or fear. "I wanted you to see that I made it," she said, smiling for the first time since I'd met her. "The data reached the right hands. Investigations have already started against the Combine. My people are finally getting the justice we've waited years for." "That's incredible," I said, genuinely relieved to see her looking so much better than the last time we'd spoken. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said, "physically at least. But there's something I still need to explain to you. Something about what happens next with the bond. I leaned forward, curious despite myself. Go on. The beacon went off at 07:43 station time, and every single screen in my office lit up at the same moment. Not one screen, not two, every screen. It doesn't disappear just because the danger has passed. It's a permanent connection, one that means my people consider you family, in every sense that matters to us. If you ever need anything, anywhere, my people will answer that call, because that's what the bond demands of us. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the weight of what she was telling me. It wasn't something I fully understood, this strange biological connection between two completely different species, but I understood enough to know it mattered deeply to her, and to whoever she represented. I appreciate that, I said, though honestly I didn't help you expecting anything in return. I know, she said, her cheeks darkening slightly again in that familiar way. That's exactly why the bond formed the way it did. My people's biology recognizes true selflessness. It's rare enough that it triggers something permanent. We talked for a while longer, about what had happened to her people, about the investigation unfolding against the Combine, about the strange twist of fate that had brought a scared stranger crashing into my life and left something unexpected behind in its place. When the call finally ended, I sat alone in the quiet of my quarters, thinking about everything that had happened since that first alarm had torn through my night shift. I'd expected danger. I'd expected fear. What I hadn't expected was to become part of something larger than myself, tied by an invisible thread to a girl from a world I'd never even heard of before that night. Kestrel Point returned to its usual routine over the following weeks, trade ships coming and going, life settling back into its predictable rhythm. But every so often, I would catch myself looking out at the stars, wondering about Vey, about her people, about the strange connection that now existed between us because of one chaotic night neither of us had planned. I never expected that answering a stranger's plea for help would lead to anything beyond the immediate crisis in front of me. I never expected gratitude to run so deep it became something permanent, something biological, something neither of us could undo even if we wanted to. But that's exactly what happened. And somehow, despite everything, I wouldn't have changed a single moment of it.